we are creating an experience for people to come into our house. Hey, welcome back to the Church Staff Book Club. My name is Jonathan Malm.
I'm Jason Young.
And we are talking about The Comeback Effect. It is a book that Jason and I wrote. Whether you read it with us or whether you're just tuning into the podcast, our goal with the Church Staff Book Club is that you don't learn to lead alone. We are all figuring this out, and why not figure it out together? So we go through one book, chapter by chapter. Again, you can read it. You can just listen to what we have to say. We try to bring out the general topic, bring out some practicality from it, and just have a great discussion in about 35 minutes. So, yes, this chapter is Know the Guest.
Yeah.
And we were kind of debriefing or briefing, I guess, before the podcast, trying to figure out what are we going to talk about. I mean, we wrote the book, obviously. We wrote the chapter. But this was probably one of my least favorite chapters, honestly, that we wrote. It's really good material, but as far as like just being super, super practical, it's more of like a conceptual thing. So we were like, how are we going to make this really practical? So you might prefer this podcast even than reading the chapter of the book. So hopefully that's the case. So what do you think? We're talking about Know the Guest. We're talking about, in the book we talk about demographics, psychographics, about all of these marketing terms, about, really knowing who we're welcoming to our church, right? But so what?
Yeah. Well, just to kind of level the playing field, everywhere you go, we go, shop, things of that nature, everybody's doing this thing. And you say, well, what is this thing? And what they're really trying to do is to create an experience for the person that is coming into their store, or whether it's shopping, a theme park, or whatever, and they can tailor things. It's kind of like when you go shop somewhere, or you look at something online, all of a sudden things like that begin to appear in your feed. It's because they're trying to tailor something to you. And so when we think about church world, it doesn't feel very spiritual. It feels like, I don't know, not icky, but like, what are we doing here? And so the idea is this. What if we could not build experiences that we think people want, but we can build experiences that make them comfortable? For example, in the book, I'm looking at it right now, I remember talking to Clint, who was VP of Barna, and he made he said an interesting quote. In fact, we captured in the book on page 64. It says this. This is what he said to me. The guest is more concerned with being comfortable than knowing we're glad they're here. And so there's this temptation, and it's not bad, but there's this temptation that we build these experiences for the guests. The problem is, what if we're not building the right experiences because we're building experiences that we think make them comfortable? Let me illustrate it this way. This is a humorous way, and I might be a little bit dramatic to communicate the point. I remember going to this church. If I said the name of the church, every person would know. It's a known church. I never park in guest parking because, I feel like they can turn up a special experience. I tend to park on the outskirts because I want to see what that experience is like on the way in.
Same. Well, I don't want to be caught in their marketing pipeline. I'm like that with every business, honestly.
Yes, same. So they wanted me to test it out, so I did. Jonathan, I swear to you, when I opened the door, there was a person standing there. It's like they rode to church with me. And they had like 18 Monster drinks in them because they were like, hey, I literally have not gotten 2 feet out of the car. And this just went on, and this person was so excited. But it made me feel really uncomfortable. And honestly, I say between you and me, but everybody else will know this now. I was trying to dump the person. And I'm good, I'm good. I didn't want to tell him why I was really there, but I'm like, you're going to end up in the report, But I'm like, I'm good.
I'll walk. Words for you, pal.
100% special mention. And I'm like, I'm good. I'll walk myself. No, I'm walking you in. Woo, And I'm like, it was just so overwhelming. And then on the way into the front door, there were like 5 people that, hey, how are you? Hey, how are you? And I couldn't have a conversation with anybody because it kept being interrupted by the next person. And I know the intention. And we talked about this in the second episode about intention and perception. The intent was to make you feel welcome. Unfortunately, they miscalculated what made me feel welcome. And so I always tend to err on the side of not embracing too many assumptions. So I think this chapter overall is, how do you build an experience with as much information as you know, but making people feel comfortable, not building everything on your own assumptions. And there are some basic things that you can use, and then there's some specific things we can use, and we could chat through what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, the most practical part of this chapter was really the idea of really writing down. I remember I was blown away. It was maybe 14 years ago when I first saw this. I think it was Christ Church of the Valley. They sent me their profile of the person they were inviting to church, right? And it had like what magazines they read, what car they drive, their level of education. They're like, and it was amazing to me because I was in marketing, like that's what my undergrad was in, and so I was like, oh, this is incredible. But it's funny because every time I mention that, I get so much pushback from they're like, well, we're creating an experience for everyone, right? And it's interesting. I finally had this dawned on me the other day when I was reading the book of John, and I'm like, John was writing, he acknowledged his audience. His audience was to the Greeks, right? Because like in the beginning was the word was the logos, the thing, there was the God thing that held everything together. It was this very like current topic, this current cultural topic of a group of people that he was writing to. And he, in the first sentence, said, hey guys, I'm writing to you. This is a book specifically for you. And yes, it's for all of us. We still read it we read it now and we get so much good stuff from John, the book of John, right? But it was written to a very specific person. And sometimes when we don't know who we're creating an experience for, we tend to create it for ourselves and not necessarily the person we would be as a guest. It's what we want to do. So before this, we were talking about, there are churches where you go in and they're like, hey, we want to honor our guests because we want to be so over the top honoring. Would you stand up and we're all going to clap for you? I've been to churches like that.
Yes.
And it's mortifying, right? But we created the experience for ourselves, as in us as staff members or us as pastors, and not for the guest that is now humiliated in that moment, right? Or same thing where it's like we come on really strong. We want to be. I always think about this with like foot washing services, right? Like Jesus gave us this amazing picture of the humble servant, and culturally that made sense because people got their feet washed, right? I don't get my foot washed anymore. Like, I don't want someone that I maybe see on a daily basis washing my feet. I'll go get a pedicure, and like those ladies, like we have this like nice relationship, but we don't talk outside of me getting a pedicure, right? Like I would feel really uncomfortable if they were my friends and I was like having them regularly wash my feet, right? So we create these wonderful ideas, these wonderful concepts of welcoming or of service, but we don't keep the guests in mind. We don't really know what they are going to feel welcomed by or not. Yeah.
And you know what's crazy, Jonathan? The example you just gave, like washing feet, very spiritual thing, right? And sometimes we forget even the thing that is spiritual can still make someone feel uncomfortable. Let me give you an illustration.
We're gonna get some messages about this. We got to clarify this.
100%. Especially when I give you this example, because somebody's gonna not like this. So I remember my family. We attended this church, and there was a part in the service. I don't remember where it was, but it was on the front side of the service, and they invite the whole church to kneel. And I'd never been in a church like that, and they do it every single Sunday, and the whole church...
I mean, it's Catholic churches, yeah.
You turn around in your chair, you kneel on the floor, if you're physically able, and you pray. And I remember, and again, I'm a church staff guy, and it still caught me off guard, and then my wife, and we pray at our home. I mean, so prayer's not like foreign. And the kids are like, what is going on? And so even the thing that was spiritual, even the thing that had great intent, I'm not saying, because I've actually talked to the staff since then, I'm not saying not doing these things, but I am saying we have to be mindful of the things, even when there's a spiritual aspect to them. We have to be mindful of them. I would say this. The point of this conversation is to think about what brings people to your church and what people need and what your posture can be in response to that. For example, when we look at major reasons people come to church, there's a lot of things that are related to transitions, right? They've moved into the city. There's been a divorce. There's some type of crisis. Maybe you've had a new baby, maybe a new job, or you've had loss in your family or something like that. But there's some type of driver that is nudging them or pulling them to the church. And so if we understand, okay, that is potentially, more than likely, the frame of mind they're coming to church with, then it may help us to pause just a little bit. So it's not that I need to know why they came. It's how can we respond in a way that is meaningful and that matters to them, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I think we have to begin, the conversation, because look, the reality is you're not going to know everything about the guest, but we can avoid the big misfires that so many churches do when we're trying to create these experiences, for the guests. So again, I think that's the place to begin. It's like, why are they even showing up, and how can we be as meaningful and make this matter as much as possible?
That's exactly it. So the kneeling thing, do that, right? But give the context, give the thing. So I think about this a lot whenever it comes to worship songs. There's a lot of theology in worship songs. I'm very biblically literate, so I understand this, right? But a lot of people, like, I grew up a missionary kid, pastor's kid, Christian school. I have like a lot of Bible in me, right? So whenever we sing that song, "Praises the waters my enemies drown in," right? Like, I get it. Exodus, my enemies, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Like, it's referencing even multiple parts of Scripture to get to that idea. Like, we're not actually drowning physical human beings, right? Like, even though that's the picture from Exodus. But, so there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, right? But we sing that song just if you're on staff, you have already wrestled through what that song means, or maybe you haven't even thought about it. So you're just singing that line. There was another song we sang. I was a worship leader, and we sang, for you will have your bride, free of all her sins, rid of all her shame, and known by her true name. And that's why it was talking about the church, right? But like, as a dude, coming in, I generally am waiting to watch my football game at the end of service, right? Like, after service, I'm going to get to watch football. I don't want to sing about being a girl, being a bride. It's weird. Like, don't not sing that. I'm not suggesting we don't sing that, but I'm saying maybe what we do instead is every time we are doing a song like that, we dive into, like, what does this mean? The Bible talks about the church as the bride of Christ. What does that mean to be the bride of Christ? A 5-minute thing. But now, instead of it being an awkward moment, it actually becomes an even deeper moment, because we've been aware that people are not where, we know the guest, we know who we're talking to, we know who's coming into our services, and we can say, okay, this person could probably really use some explanation to know why we're doing this.
Yeah. What
an amazing thing we can do. And we do that with worship. We can do that with a lot of things, especially, though, when we're talking about hospitality.
We'll get back to the conversation, but real quick, I want to tell you about our sponsor. Church hospitality, guest services, first impressions. These are phrases we as church leaders are very familiar with. But sometimes through the grind of daily tasks and prepping for church each week, we lose the heart of hospitality. Guest care becomes a checklist rather than a discipleship effort. First Impressions is an organization committed to helping churches create meaningful connections with guests, from the first visit to lifelong discipleship. Whether you're looking to sharpen your team's skills, build a proven follow-up plan, or take your guest experience to the next level, they've got you covered. Through their First Impressions online conference, First Impressions live conference, First Impressions Academy, and executive coaching, they equip churches with the strategies, systems, and support you need to invite, welcome, and connect with your church guests. Learn more at firstimpressions.church. And now back to the conversation.
Please, if you're watching and listening right now, we're not saying to stop doing all those things, right? What we're saying is approach or maybe proceed with caution, because we can quickly make these decisions when we're familiar and we are anchored in understanding. Then, like, we don't think anything about it. I remember working at a church once, and the senior pastor, it was about a song. And it was what you just said, Jonathan. It was about the lyrics of the song. And he's like, when we think about a person that's unchurched or been hurt by the church, like, well,
or frankly churched. A lot of church people are biblically illiterate. That's actually really fair. He wanted us to proceed with caution. So he's not, don't sing the song, but proceed with caution. In fact, I remember I worked at a church
And I loved what the senior pastor encouraged those of us that hosted, and hosted being, typically some people say, oh, the announcement person, and that's not how we looked at hosted. It was really kind of a guide, for the service. But I love what he said, because we discovered that the number one question men wanted to know in that service was, how long will I be here? And so what we did is, in the hosting bit on the front end, we answered the question. So you didn't sit and wonder, how long am I going to be here? We answered the question, hey, we're so glad that you're here today. We're going to be here for about 60 minutes, or 1 hour. And it's like, oh, okay, so you already beat me to the punch. You told me how long. And if you're going to say that, bro, you better deliver on that, because that builds trust or it erodes trust, right? So it's just knowing your audience. And this can happen in a parking lot. It can happen in the lobby. It can happen from the platform. But it is, when you think about what you just said on the hospitality side, it's be careful of assumptions. People assume, oh, everybody knows this.
Yeah.
Everybody's familiar with this language. Everybody, and the reality, and again, we're not saying not to do that stuff, but we're also saying be mindful when you're building these moments that, not everybody is. In fact, I would say it this way. Assumption is the fastest way to embarrass someone new. And so if you're building everything with assumptions, you can easily and quickly embarrass someone new, because nobody likes to be pointed out or stand out as not knowing what is familiar, right?
Yeah.
So as much as you can reduce that, lower those levels, it's a really important step, to take in the experience.
And now I'm going to push back, because I know there's a huge group, so this is so the context you're talking about is a very seeker-friendly context, right? Where it's like, they might not know Jesus. We're planning on them being unchurched. And there's this big discussion, right? Like, is the church for discipleship, or is the church for evangelism? I believe it can be for both, right?
Yeah.
But so now let's talk about for the people that are on the discipleship side, where it's like, well, no, we're not building an experience for like unbelievers. And I think there's that validity to that, right? So, like, this whole thing of knowing the guest, like knowing what they're worried about, can feel so consumeristic, can feel so like marketing, right? And I just think about, I always go back to, we are creating an experience for people to come into our house. Whenever I bring someone into my house, whenever my sister-in-law's boyfriend is coming over, I want to know, is he vegan? Does he like, my brother-in-law's wife is pescatarian, right? So like, I want to know that, so that I can then craft the experience for her a little bit differently. And because I know that about her, I'll even say, hey, just to your point, how long the service is, hey, this doesn't have meat in it. Like, I'll tell that, right? Like, because my goal is not to, they should just eat meat because they're coming into my house, right? Like, meat is good. I think meat is good for them, right? Like, we need protein. The idea is like, how can I know the guests so that they feel like they're getting what they need from this? And we go to service to get something that we need, right? Whether that's community, like we're not, yes, we should be giving, we should be volunteering, we should be giving that, but we also do go to get, right? So knowing the guest helps make sure that they know that they can get what they need, and that we can give them what they need. And then they can hopefully, because they're getting, they can also give back as well.
Yeah. And maybe this is a point to clarify, maybe. When I think about a guest, I don't know if this is right or wrong. When I think about a guest, I guess you do kind of separate them a little bit. I always think about someone coming in, whether it's their first time or their 50th time as a guest, because I think language determines behavior. So the way we talk about people influences how I show up for people, right? Or with people. And so
I think of a guest as anyone who this is not their house.
Yeah.
And that could be someone who's the 50th time, who just does not feel like they belong still.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we're trying to get them from being a guest, right? Like, everyone who comes to our church is not a guest.
Yeah.
Although we still treat people with hospitality. If they're not like, it's not like they live in the church, right? We give hospitality to everyone. But yeah, anyway,
that's right. No, it's good. I mean, because hospitality, if we're not careful, it's all in like, we have to, and we'll talk about this in future episodes, but the distinction of hospitality and service, right? Service is the act of. hospitality really comes from like the depth from, like it's also creates this feeling, because you can deliver great service devoid of feeling.
Yeah.
But you can't be hospitable and people not feel warmth and care from you, right? So when we think about whether it's first time or 50th time, I have to be reminded that humanity in general show up with needs. The need to feel seen, the need to feel listened to, the need to feel valued, the need to feel validated, right? We all have these needs. I don't care if you've been at church for 40 years or church for 40 minutes. So I think understanding basic human needs, if I'm leading volunteers, I used to lead a lot of volunteers, I would teach them basic human needs, realizing that they too, as volunteers, are showing up with those as well.
Yeah.
But it's how do you navigate your own as you help someone navigate their own that they may not even have words for, right?
Yeah.
So that's why, yes, part of it is understanding this persona. And you talked about, the Christ Church of the Valley, CCV. My buddy John, we would talk about like who their person is. It doesn't mean they ostracize everybody else.
Yeah.
But they have a tighter focus that does bring in, other people around them. So leading in this role, I think demographics are important. We hear that a lot. Psychographics kind of understand the psychology, the human emotion of the people coming in. But I would say this. If you're going to err on the side of anything, err on the side of being a dispenser of empathy. And it is understanding people, but maybe it's asking a question like this. What does the guest need from me right now? What does the guest need from me in the next 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it might be? And I would say this, the guest is less interested in perfection. You work hard on your processes during the week. You train people to know the process. But remember this, the guest is less interested in a perfect process, and the guest is interested in personalization, because whether we like it or not, there is a selfish aspect to all of us that we want things that are crafted for us. And I know some people listening may say, well, the church shouldn't be like that. I'm not saying that I'm endorsing selfishness. What I'm saying is every person has a selfish aspect. So how can we create some personalization that they feel is for them? It could be as simple as they're using their name. It could be as simple as how you help them check in their children. It could be you walking them to the right spot. Again, I'm not talking like things that cost anything except intentionality. So, because at the end of the day, last thing I'll say about this, when guests leave and they remember you, very rarely are they going to remember the execution of what you did, but they will remember the emotion that you created in them and for them.
Yeah.
And so they're not going to remember maybe every sermon point, but they'll remember how Jonathan helped me with blank, or the way that Jason listened to me blank. So these are the types of things when we talk about knowing your guest. It's thinking about they're human. Everybody's coming in with needs. And what is it that how can you show up for them by being fully present to give them a moment that is meaningful and a moment that matters? So when they tell the story later, they're telling a story of really how you showed up for them. And that makes them feel known.
Yeah. And I think it's so important because we're so sensitive. A lot of churches, some churches are fully bought into marketing, but we're so sensitive to like, again, are we trying to make this consumeristic? And I always bring it back to my house. Mm-hmm. Do I care how I make my son feel whenever I'm interacting with him? Yes. Because I know that I have a chance to craft his journey in life, right? Mm-hmm. Like I have a chance to lead him closer to Jesus, to see, is God a good father like my father, or is God a good father that's different than my father, right? Like I care about the way he feels in that. And I do need to know him to know that, man, what he needs right now in this moment is this from me. What I tend to, we talk about love languages, right? Like my tendency for love language is physical touch and quality time, right? Like, but does my son need something different from me? Does he need words of affirmation? How does he experience love? And it's so important that we take away the sensitivity from like knowing the guest, marketing to them, making it perfect. I think in every sense, like churches who have embraced marketing are worried about this too much. Churches are rejecting marketing or like missing out on some of the benefit of it, right? Like the idea that like the point is just love. The point is we're trying to love people the best we can. And it's funny because when we talk about writing books, if you write a book to a small group of people, the book is going to do better than if you write a book to a big group of people. This book, right? This one's our best-selling book, right? It's very specifically, we wrote it to the leader of the guest services at your church. That's a very tight, that's a tiny niche, right?
Yeah.
But so many people have bought it because we actually hit the target. We did, and we looked for opportunities. Can we talk about a business here? Can we give examples, right? We find a way to expand it as much as possible. But the book that we wrote with a very specific person in mind, and it helped to be much more successful. And I'd say the same is true for every experience you're creating at your church. Like you said, not to exclude, but to say, are we actually reaching someone? Who do we feel the passion to reach? And often that comes down to the personality of the leader. You're going to tend to reach the people that you're like, right? As a pastor, right? The pastor is going to reach people like himself, So we don't necessarily craft an experience for us if we're a second tier, if we're, a guest services director or something. We look at our pastor and say, it's probably going to reach them. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe you somehow reach people that are completely different than your pastor, but just knowing who does your church tend to reach that, man, this type of person just keeps coming. I don't know what it is. They keep getting drawn here. That's probably who you need to craft the experience for. Meaning you're trying to serve their needs, not, we're trying to reach, we're trying to market to the right person, right? No, we're just trying to meet the people that God seems to send our way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this is not the first conversation about this topic, right?
We have this conversation all the time, yeah.
Totally. And I mean, there's even been moments where you and I are trying to figure out, who are we talking? And we might even see it differently, and we eventually land somewhere. And again, this debate, church, corporate, it doesn't matter. This conversation has been happening for a long time. And what we don't want you to do is to get lost in the minutia and forget the person, right? Because really at the end of the day, what we're talking about is knowing the guest, knowing the person, right?
The person.
And if you're listening and you're like, I just don't even know where to start, right? Are there basics? When we think about knowing the guest, again, we're talking about human needs, thinking about what's bringing them in today. What transition might they be facing, a situation they're trying to navigate, and they are deciding to show up, and it's an opportunity that they're, in essence, they don't say this, but they're inviting you into a portion of their world for the moment. And that is such a massive responsibility. So like you said, Jonathan, really you're hosting them in a place that you want to matter to them, for them to feel meaningful, right? And so it could be as basic as, the eye contact you give, because it makes them feel seen. It could be walking them from A to B. It makes them feel like they're not alone. It's interesting when you talk about, when we talk about joy, and really joy, there's a lot of research in this over the last 5 decades, but there's joy by definition is knowing that someone is glad to be with you. So somebody coming to your church, knowing that you, volunteer, staffers, whatever, glad to be with him. And by the way, you got to model this with your volunteers first, right? Another simple way, this is going to sound so basic, but I'm telling you, this is probably the one where I see a lot of hiccups. Signage. There's a book called Invisibles, and there's a chapter in the book that talks about the guy who did the signage at Atlanta, Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. He did the international terminal. His name's Jim Harding. He's based in Nashville. And it was cool because he and I were chatting. I had him come down to when I was at this particular church to evaluate our signage. And he really educated me on the importance of signage. And what you're doing is you're making the experience easier and better for someone because you're removing any guessing moments for them. And they feel like you've been thoughtful about the experience for them. So as simple as signage can be a way that you can demonstrate, I know what you value, and that's, here's where you go. We don't want confusion here, we want clarity. And so again, it doesn't have to be super, super in depth. What it does have to be is intentionally thoughtful, right? And we want to demonstrate care in all that we do. So you can start as basic as that.
I mean, that's a great example because, whenever we think about if you work at a church, you're thinking about 90% of your time, 80% of your time is in the church offices. So you're like, where are the church offices? The things that you care about knowing where they are not the things that the guest on Sunday morning who's actually consuming the signage cares about. They care about bathrooms, where are my kids, and where do I go for the worship center, right? And maybe where the exit is. How do I get out of here?
Yeah.
So those are the things that you want to make them like unquestioningly visible versus beautiful, which is, designers tend to be the ones who design the signage. And, we've seen from Disney that purple and yellow are right. The high contrast, like almost ugly colors, because you don't want to make people have to guess where they're going. So yeah, knowing your guests, knowing what they're experiencing, how are they experiencing your church? Even another simple thing is just like, instead of, showing up 2 hours early to church, like, why don't you actually show up maybe on your week off? You show up when a guest would show up, even 5 minutes late or 5 minutes before, and feel what the parking lot feels like. So knowing your guests, knowing how they experience your church. There's another chapter about that. We'll get into that later. But just some super practical ways to do that. But okay, as we close, and you kind of talked about this, what do you feel like churches could do to know their guests? One simple thing that like churches tend not to know their guests. What do you think they can do to know their guests?
Yeah, let me give you two fast. One, just start noticing things. Noticing things that strengthening your noticer muscle. So begin to be more observant, right? Again, be careful like how you respond, because you want to, assumptions can kill hospitality. But begin to notice and observe, right? And then learn as a team. The second thing is, this is a little bit more effort, ask. And we used to do surveys all the time with guests, and we would ask them. And so, when we look in the mirror, we might think we're doing a great job, but on the other side of us, we may realize there's some things that we could do. So you could put together a survey, formal or informal, and just ask the guests certain questions that could be really insightful to you as the staff person, to us as the volunteer, to us as the church, that then allows to tweak things so it feels a little bit more not targeted, because that's not a great word, but directed at or personal for the guest that's coming in. Yeah,
and I would say just pick someone in your church. This is what I would say. It's like, who's the person that is like, they represent that type of person. At my church, I think of that person as Victoria, this girl Victoria. I'm like, she is who we are reaching, and crafting things for Victoria takes so much of the guesswork out of it. So
yeah, that's good.
Well, we hope you found this helpful. If you have questions, leave comments if you're on YouTube, or hit us up on Instagram or Facebook. Make sure and subscribe to the podcast. We'll be talking about chapter 4 next week if you're reading along with us. If not, we'll just see you there. See you next week.